All right, hello again, Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College. And if you've never heard the term pilot error, that's what I just experienced. Okay? The problem with my code was in my actual class right here, I was passing in F, L, H, and R, which I should have been using on the right-hand side of the equal sign. But I had first name there and there, last name there and there, hours there and there, and rate there and there. All right, so what that resulted in was me getting an error that said exception error null pointer, because there were no values that were being set for first name, last name, hours, and rate. There were values that were being set for F, L, H, and R, so I changed those accordingly. All right, so I went and commented out just a whole boatload of stuff in here, but now I can remove this. And I can remove, I went and commented out just, like I said, just a whole boatload of stuff here. All right, now I'm going to save everything and try to run it. We'll see how it works. Okay, there's me. There's Jeff. I worked 40 hours, $20 an hour. I made $800. That's a good start. There's Sandy. She worked 50 hours, $20 an hour. So 40 times 20, which is her straight time, is 800. 10 times 20 times 1.5 is 300. 800 plus 300 is 1100. So that worked. Taylor, we reset the hours because they were bad, so that she made 0. Mackenzie, we reset the rate to 0, and she also made nothing. And Chloe, just to make sure, it was set to FNU, LNU, 0, 0, and 0. So that all worked. Everything worked. The only thing that we should add in here is, remember that we did an employee count, and we did a count of our entire, so we did a count both of the number of employees we had and for our total pay. So we can say here J option pane dot show message dialog. No. And we'll say total number of, oops, I didn't plug my machine in this morning. So I thought I did, but I did not. Okay, so total number of employees plus, this isn't a get routine, this should just be the count. And we can also say here total employee payroll amount. And that should be tote gross. And we want to format tote gross. All right. And we have to let it know. So we could say any employee. So I could say Jeff.count and it would work. But I don't need to. I can just say payroll.count, all right, because of the way that that variable was defined. And payroll, whoops, payroll dot tote gross. All right, so let's save it one more time and run it, we should get the same thing we got before. There's Jeff, there's Sandy, there's Taylor, there's Mackenzie, there's Chloe. Total number of objects we had were 5. And remember, I made $800, Sandy made $1,100, which would be $1,900. Taylor, Mackenzie, and Chloe all had 0. So that worked. So everything appears to work. Did we get our numbers down here also? No, because I guess I didn't put in, I could have put in system.out.print lines in there just as well, but I didn't. Thought I did, but I did not. All right, so let's decompose this. Let's take this back to the beginning. The earlier version of this was 1 hour and 7 minutes long. So I am currently producing that right now. So that may pop up during this explanation. Okay, so let's take a look at what we did first. We did payroll. All right, this was the comment. A third payroll program just demonstrating the use of classes, getters, setters, and let's change that to constructors and overloaded constructors from Chapter 3 of our Java textbook. All right, that is Java textbook. So here was our class header, curly brace, ending curly brace down here. Notice how long this thing was. We had no main in here because main is in our separate driver file. So everything was between those curly braces. Every employee that we created, or every payroll object, we were going to check to make sure that if they worked more than 40 hours, they got overtime at a rate of 1.5, that their hours were between 0 and 84, and that their pay rate was between 0 and 100. So I call these class constants because even though we created 5 payroll objects, they all had access to this. All right. But these, where these said class constants, these say instance variables, which mean for each employee had their own first name, their own last name, their own hours, their own rate, their own gross. So class means that it's available to every object. Instance means each object gets their own copy. These were class variables. We wanted to say protected here so we could change it. It might have worked without protected. It might have worked with private. We should try that just to see. So let's change that to private. And let's change that to private. And let's see if the program still works. I'm not sure exactly why I set that up to be protected, but we'll find out if we go to run this and it does not work. I'm already getting errors. It says it's in my driver. And it's down here. And the error says, change the visibility of the count to package, all right, or create getters and setters for this file. So what they're saying is either I have to change that back to protected, or I have to make other changes. Let's just go back and make it the way it was. All right. These are class variables, where the other ones were instance variables. Since they're class variables, these are shared by all objects. Remember, I made 5 objects, so count should be 5 when I get done. I want the total gross of all employees. If I did not make them class variables, all right, then I'd have 5 different counts of 1 each. And the total gross, I'd have 5 different total grosses. I don't want that. Okay, we'll get into protected more in later chapters. And I'll try to explain it, show it in a better way than I just did. Here's our first constructor. So in this one, we're passing in a string for the first name, a string for the last name, a double for the hours worked, and a double for the hourly rate. So there they are. We're also checking each one of these. All right. And I was thinking, there's nothing wrong with what I did here, but I probably would be able to come in and do this just to show you. And I'm gonna put this in and then see if I made any mistakes. So I'm gonna call here set first name, set last name, set hours, and set rate. And it appears as though it does not like this. It's not applicable for the arguments. Well, let's see if we can figure out why. Okay, so I'm calling set first name. So I should have a value that I'm passing into there, and I'm not. Okay, so I should call that with F, I should call that with L, I should call that with H, and I should call that with R. All right, now let's save this, run it again, see if we get the same results. There's Jeff, there's Sandy, there's Taylor, that's wrong. I don't know how that happened, but it did. There's Chloe, 5, well, somehow Kenzie got screwed up, so let's see if we can fix that first of all. Go back to the driver, and where did we set the stuff for Mackenzie? Ah, okay, 1001, it accepted it there. So, we called set hours and we called set rate. So there's set hours, we called that. So that called set hours greater than or equal to min hours and less than or equal to max hours. But this did not work, this test. The rate we put in was greater than or equal to, all right, 0, but it was not less than or equal to 1,000, which is what we had set up in here. Actually, we set it to 100. So it allowed that bad rate to go in there. It didn't make the check. So we were able to call these correctly, but we were not able to, it overrode. In other words, even though we had put in here greater than or equal to 0 and less than or equal to 100, it didn't take it. So what I'll do, sorry about this, is I'm going to comment all of these out. All right, that should fix our problem that we had. So let's save this, go back and run it again and make sure that it's running correctly. Jeff, Sandy, Taylor, Kenzie, Chloe, and it's correct again. Now, I promise you that I will try to figure out what that problem is. All right, but as of right now, I don't know what it is. So in this constructor, we are not only adding 1 to our total employees counter, because we had 5 employees, and that's what made it equal 5, but we're saying if the first name was empty, set it to FNU. If the last name was empty, set it to LNU. If the hours were not between 0 and 84, set it to 0. If it was between 0 and 84, accept it. If the rate was not between 0 and 100, set it to 0. If it was between 0 and 100, accept it. That was the first constructor. Our second constructor just set everything to default values. So I shouldn't even say validate because this isn't true. This should be set each instance variable to default values. So if we passed in, if we call and create a payroll object that gets passed in a string double, all right? And if you look, that's what we did: string double, string double, string double, string double. So those first four should have called this constructor and done everything that's in here, and they did. The last one, the Chloe payroll object, we passed in with nothing. So that should have called this constructor. All right. As far as the gets and sets, you can see what's going on here. All right. In all of the get routines, we're literally just returning the associated value. And we have to put the type of the variable. So first name is a string and nothing gets passed in. Last name is a string and nothing gets passed in. Hours is a double and nothing gets passed in. Rate is a double and nothing gets passed in. And for get gross, and they mention this in the book, we don't want there to be any what's referred to as stale data. We don't want any stale data. So what we're doing with that is we are figuring it out every time you call the get routine. And we're saying if you have no overtime coming, pay you straight. If you do have overtime coming, figure it out. Add the gross that you just calculated to your total gross. So increment total gross accumulator. Increment. And then return the gross. Now for our set routines, we're making sure again there's something in there. We're coming in here again. All right, and we're doing this. All right. We're coming in and we're validating in each case. So then we came over to our driver. And in our driver, we created 5 objects. We tested the first one, which had a valid hours and a valid rate, but no overtime. We tested our second one, which had a valid hours and a valid rate with overtime. We tested our third one to make sure, since we had an invalid hours, it was reset to 0. We tested our fourth to make sure that it had an invalid rate, so it was reset to 0. And we tested our fifth with nothing passed in to see if our default values were set. And you saw that they were. Now, I'm going to do something I did not do before. All right. So after we do this, I'm going to go back and I'm going to invoke a couple methods here. The problem that we had was our Taylor object had a bad hours. Our Kenzie object had a bad rate. So I'm going to reset those. So I'm going to say Taylor dot set hours, and I'm going to set her hours to 25. All right. And Mackenzie or Kenzie had a bad rate, so I'm going to set her pay rate to 25. All right. And Chloe, so I'm going to say give Taylor object a valid hours. Give Kenzie object a valid rate. And then finally, give the Chloe object valid name. Sorry. First name, last name, hours, and rate. So Chloe dot set first name Chloe. Chloe dot set last name, Scott. Chloe dot set, just keep it real simple, hours, 10. So we'll say she worked 10 hours, and her rate is also 10. All right. So after we do these, each one of these, I'm going to come in here and redisplay the Taylor information after we reset the Taylor stuff. So I'm going to put in here redisplay, which isn't really a word, I don't think, but that's fine. So we're going to redisplay that. Then we're going to come in and we're going to redisplay the Kenzie information. And then we're going to come back in and finally redisplay the Chloe information. And when we get done, we're going to redisplay the junk on the bottom too. Oops, I don't want to do that yet. I can do that. Yeah, I can do that. And as I see here, I spelled total wrong. Okay, that's got to be moved, but that's no biggie. All right, so this Kenzie.rate has got to be changed. That should have been put here. So we reset Taylor's hours, and then we're going to display it to make sure it's set to 25 now. We reset Mackenzie's rate, we're going to redisplay it to make sure that it's 25. In fact, let's change it to something else. Change it to 15. All right, then we've got the Chloe information. We didn't put a semicolon there. So we set her first name to Chloe, her last name to Scott, her hours to 10, her rate to 10, so that should say 100. So when you think about it now, we should have a bunch of new stuff print out here, if this all worked. So let's go back, and in our driver, there's Jeff, 40-2800. There's Sandy, 50-20-1100. There's the original Taylor with 0 hours. There's the original Mackenzie with 0 rate. There's the original Chloe with all defaults. Total number of employees originally was 5 with 1900. Now, we reset Taylor. We gave her 25 hours. 25 times 20 gave her $500. That's good. We reset Mackenzie, her rate to 15. 40 times 15 is 600. That's good. And we reset Chloe, 10, 10, and 100. And that's good. So we still have 5, but now we have 3,100. And that was 600, which was Taylor, I believe, 500, which was Mackenzie, I believe, and 100, which was Chloe. 1,200, 600 plus 500 plus 100, 1,200 plus the 19 gave us 3,100. So what I have shown you in this driver is how we can come in here and instantiate or create 5 different payroll objects. For the first 4 of these objects, when we created them, we went in here and we invoked this constructor, which checked to make sure everything was in range. If it was in range, it accepted it. If it was not within range, it set it to 0. And if it would have been the bad name, etc. Then we came in and we did the last object, which we set nothing to, so it should have gotten all of our defaults. So this constructor was called. The first name was set to FNU for first name unknown. The last name was set to LNU for last name unknown. Hours and rate were both set to 0. So we did that. Then we printed out all of that information. You saw that the Jeff was valid, everything was valid with no overtime. The Sandy, everything was valid with overtime. The Taylor, the hours were invalid, so that was reset to 0, which made 0 times the rate of $20 an hour, also 0, so that became the gross pay. The Kenzie object, we put in a bad rate. That was 1,001. So that was valid. The first name was valid, the last name was valid, the hours were valid, but the rate was invalid. So that got reset to 0. 1,001 times 0, which was 0 there. Then we did the Chloe object, which had all of the default values. Then we went back in and we added everything. So we had 5 employees with 800 plus 1,100 plus 0 plus 0 plus 0, which gave us 1,900. Then we reset Taylor's hours so they were correct. So Taylor now has 25 hours that she worked at $20 an hour. So that changed this to her first name, her last name, 25 for the hours, 20 for the rate, and 500 for the gross. Then for Kenzie, we reset her rate. So her rate was now, it was Kenzie Scott 40, and her rate was now 15. 40 times 15 gave us 600 right here for the gross. Then we reset all of Chloe's information, her first name, her last name, her hours, and her rate. So that came out as Chloe Scott 10, 10, 100. When we added the 600 for Taylor, plus the 500 for Kenzie, plus the 100 for Chloe, 600 plus 500 plus 100 was 1,200, plus the 1,100, the 800 for Jeff, and the 1,100 for Sandy. That gave us a total of 3,100. Now I went through that quickly, and hopefully I didn't confuse you. All right, but let's come through here and let's change this. Let's do put in a couple more messages to try to make this a little bit easier to understand. Payroll object Taylor info with hours reset to 25. This is Kenzie, the information with rate reset to 15. Okay, thank you. This is the Chloe information with all values reset. All right, so we will change what we have there. We will add a little bit of stuff. So this is null, and I'll put reset here, and I'll also put reset here. So hopefully that'll help a little bit as far as your understanding of what's going on. And of course, as I can tell, I put them all in the wrong place. Okay. So that's with rates reset to 15. That was the Taylor. With the hours reset to 25. All right, the Kenzie reset, and the Chloe, and that's with all values reset. All right, let's run it one last time, shall we? All right, errors. I've got one error. It's on that line. I forgot my plus sign there. All right, hopefully that fixed everything. Let's save all and run it again. There's the Jeff. That's not going to change. Valid, 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 valid. There's the Sandy. valid, 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 whereas the Jeff did not have overtime, the Sandy does. There's Taylor with an invalid hours, so it was reset to 0, making the whole thing 0. There is a Kenzie with the invalid rate, morning, and it's set to 0, and the whole thing is 0. There's all of our default values, which gave us 5 with 1900. Now, payroll with Taylor info with hours reset to 25. And you can see that that's now valid. Kenzie with info with rate reset to 15, and you see that's valid. Chloe with all values reset, you see that's valid. And we've got an updated total payroll amount. The only thing I want to finish, go back and reset here, is I want to remove that and reset that to this. All right, hopefully you got something out of that. I realize it was a little scatterbrained, but that ends our discussion for now and our first look at classes. Okay? When I come back, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do an example for Chapter 5, which was on loops and files. So I will be back with that example shortly.